T-minus 2 hours and 13 minutes. We are tracking the red crew, 2 technicians and a safety representative that have made entry to the launch pad and are currently inside the compartment where the leaky replenish valve is. Again, the red crew, which is a specially trained crew to work in and around a fully tanked rocket, is inside the compartment area where the leaky replenish valve is. It's on the liquid hydrogen side. Their job is to torque down the bolts, the packing nuts on this particular valve, and that is, as I understand it from the launch team, currently in work. The safety team is watching on cameras that are in and around the launch pad. This is not a totally uncommon operation. The red crew, there's a number of individuals who stand by ready to do work on the red crew, who are specifically trained in their areas of expertise when they have to put hands on at the launch pad after or during tanking. So this is likely to eat into the launch window. An update on the tanks. We are in replenish on both the liquid oxygen core stage and upper stage. We are in stop flow for liquid hydrogen on the upper stage and the core stage. And that stop flow, of course, is related to the intermittent leak on the replenish valve that's on the side of the mobile launcher. We saw the red crew go in. The red crew estimates it'll take about 15 minutes to complete the job. And then they're coming right back out. This is Artemis Launch Control. T-minus 2 hours and 7 minutes and counting. We are currently tracking work done by the red crew, currently out at the launch pad, a specially trained crew, torquing down some bolts on a hydrogen replenish valve. The safety team has eyes on it. They're currently doing that work. I want to make a programming note for you. Currently, if you're watching NASA TV's main channel, we are now going to begin the special launch broadcast that we have planned. Meanwhile, over on the NASA television media channel, we will continue with operational commentary. Again, we're getting ready to start a launch broadcast, a special launch broadcast on the NASA TV main channel, but we will maintain operational commentary on NASA TV's media channel. Please stand by for that. This is Artemis Launch Control.
"50 years after we last left footprints on the moon, NASA's Artemis I is our first bold step towards getting us back there and pushing us farther than we've ever been before."
Landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
You are looking at the world's most powerful rocket and Orion spacecraft live on Launch Pad 39B. Artemis I embodies the hard work of thousands across the world, determined to explore for the benefit of all. Welcome, and thank you for joining us live at Kennedy Space Center, where the energy here is palpable as we attempt to make history today. I'm Megan Cruz, and this is NASA astronaut Kayla Barron. Kayla, great to have you here again.
So awesome to be here tonight.
Well, some of you may know this, but Kayla served as a mission specialist for NASA's SpaceX Crew 3 mission. It launched to the International Space Station in November of last year, and she lived and worked there for about 6 months. Today, I am thrilled to have her here with me to talk about this rocket behind us illuminating beautifully the night sky here in Florida.
Yeah, it's so awesome to be here tonight. When I first walked up and saw the view from the desk here, I was just blown away by how close it is and what an awesome view it's going to be when we get to launch time.
Yeah, it's a magnificent view, and I know you're especially excited about this because if we launch today, this will be the first launch that you actually see from the ground.
Exactly. I've never been able to come see a launch in person, except for my own, of course, but that's a little bit different perspective.
Very different, yeah.
But to be here for the world's most powerful rocket and the first test flight of Orion and SLS is just amazing.
Yeah. So our 2-hour launch window opens at 1:04 a.m. Eastern Time. So Kayla, tell everyone, why are we returning to the moon?
We are returning to the moon to learn more about it. The moon is a perfect place to learn more about our solar system, how the moon formed, but also how the Earth and the rest of our solar system formed. And we know so little about it. There's a lot to learn by returning there and doing some awesome geology work, but it's also the perfect proving ground for our continuation, exploring further into our solar system and eventually going to Mars.
Right.
We need to test all the operations concepts, all the equipment, habitats, rovers, suits, all of these things. And so it's the perfect place to test all of those things out and learn the things we need to do something that's almost hard to wrap your head around, going all the way to another planet.
Absolutely. Really ambitious goals, and it all starts here with Artemis 1. So Artemis 1 is the first flight test of NASA's brand new Space Launch System, or SLS rocket. It's the world's most powerful rocket and will send an uncrewed Orion spacecraft farther around the moon than any of the Apollo missions before it. Artemis 2 will be the first crewed mission around the moon, and then Artemis 3 will use a brand new human landing system to bring astronauts to the surface of the moon. Future Artemis missions will dock to Gateway, NASA's lunar orbiting space station, before descending to the moon. So Kayla, what must we demonstrate with Artemis 1 before we put astronauts on board for those future crewed missions?
This is our first integrated test flight of the rocket, the Space Launch System rocket, and Orion, the capsule that crew will fly in on Artemis 2. And so it's really important for us to put all of those systems together and actually send them to do a mission, test all those systems in real time in concert together. We do a lot of testing before we get to this moment, before we get to launch day, but it's not integrated and we're not actually putting the systems under all of the real world stresses they're going to see.
Right.
So we want to see the rocket perform, we want to see Orion make it around the moon, go super deep into space, and then come home and successfully re-enter. So the heat shield actually has to withstand the fastest and hottest re-entry we've ever seen in human spaceflight. So that's a big thing we want to see. The heat shield perform successfully, and then of course recover the vehicle, test all of that. So it's a lot, but it's the important first step before we put crew on the vehicle.
Yeah, lots of eyes on this one for sure. So tanking of the rocket began at 4:30 this afternoon. NASA's Daryl Nail is inside with the launch team and has some information about an issue they're currently working.
Right, Megan, the launch director gave the go for tanking shortly after 3 p.m. this afternoon, but as of right now, there is a red crew, as they are named, a specially trained team of individuals out at the pad making an unplanned change to a replenish valve on the liquid hydrogen side. There are 2 technicians and a safety representative that are right now working inside the mobile launcher. It's in an open air area that has a replenish valve that goes to the liquid hydrogen side of the core stage. Now this happened roughly earlier this evening, probably about an hour ago, when a leak was detected at the core stage liquid hydrogen valve by the launch team here inside firing room 1 at the Launch Control Center. Unfortunately, the team here was unable to remedy the leak remotely, and so it became necessary to send a crew of individuals called the Red Crew out to the launch pad to make a hands-on fix, so to speak, to that valve. And what they're doing is they're torquing down bolts that are on the valve. They believe that by torquing these bolts down, they'll get a better seal on that replenish valve, and that should remedy the leak. The leak was detected by the hazardous operations team here inside the launch control when the percentage of hydrogen went above 1%. Now that's significant for this particular area because it is an open air location, the skid valve that runs the liquid hydrogen into the core stage. And we had reached replenish when this leak was detected. Over on the liquid hydrogen side, of course, there's two tanks on the core stage, liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen. Both had been topped and gotten into replenish when this leak was detected. Currently, liquid oxygen is topped off and stable in replenish, but the liquid hydrogen is in stop flow at the moment, which will prevent them from proceeding forward with a launch until that leak is remedied. Again, this red crew is inside the area, inside the blast danger area, working inside the mobile launcher, torquing down those nuts that are associated with the replenish valve for the liquid hydrogen side of the core stage. Of course, we'll keep you updated on the operation. In the meantime, I'll send it back to Megan.
Thank you for that update, Daryl. And yes, we are looking forward to your next update as to what happened with the red team out there on the pad. Now, today will be our third opportunity to launch Artemis I. The launch team called off the first 2 attempts due to issues while loading propellant into the rocket. The team addressed those issues and planned to try again in September, but then Hurricane Ian made landfall here in Florida as a strong Category 4 storm. Satellite imagery there shows us the storm went right by launch pad 39B. Thankfully, the rocket was safe inside the vehicle assembly building at the time. The team rolled the rocket back to the pad 2 weeks ago, and it stayed there through Hurricane Nicole, which made landfall last week as a Category 1 just south of Kennedy Space Center. Teams inspected everything after the storm and confirmed they were ready to try and launch today. Now, Daryl is one of a team of people helping to bring you today's uncrewed flight test. We have Jasmine Hopkins nearby, also inside with the launch team, who will interview some key players in our return to the moon. We also have Leah Cheshire inside Mission Control at Johnson Space Center. Dan Hewitt with a new tool we're excited to show you. Leo Martin at the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex, and finally Brian Cizik with the U.S. Space Force monitoring weather. With 1 hour, 54 minutes until liftoff, how are we looking, Brian?
And you showed we certainly had some interesting weather here in East Central Florida over the last several months, but I'm happy to report we're not looking at any type of satellite imagery like the ones you just showed. Overall, weather is looking quite favorable as we head throughout the countdown and into the launch window. So here's what we're looking at right now, really just one area of concern. That's these upper level clouds that are moving in. So there's a cold front in the Gulf of Mexico right now. That's producing some showers in the Gulf, but those are not expected to get to us by the launch window. But the upper level winds are bringing in some cirrus clouds that are moving in. Now they're high enough and thin enough where they're really not going to be a concern. For it to be a thick cloud layers rule violation, they'd have to be a lot thicker and a little bit lower in the atmosphere in order to hold a charge. So that's what we're looking for in these lightning launch commit criteria, not just natural lightning, but rocket triggered lightning potential, as some of these clouds can hold a charge. A rocket can actually induce a lightning strike in an atmosphere that's not strong enough to produce a natural lightning strike. So that's really what we're watching. But right now, weather is go. These clouds, as I said, are high enough and thin enough where they're really not going to be much of concern. But we are going to be watching it. My colleagues Melody Lovin, Mark Berger, and the rest of the launch weather team will be watching this very closely as we head closer to T0. So let's take a look at the graphic. The latest briefing, 90% go. Really the only concern being the thick cloud layers rule and a very small concern for the cumulus cloud rule. But overall, the weather is looking favorable. As I said, right now, weather is go. Those clouds are high enough and thin enough where we do not expect them to be a concern. So I'm happy to report a very favorable launch forecast as we head closer to T0. Megan, back to you.
Don't you just love hearing 90%? You know, that's wonderful, especially here in Florida. You know what I mean? Weather can really be tricky here in Florida. So 90% is perfect. Now, Florida Space Coast has been the primary launch site for NASA's crewed missions for the last 6 decades. First Apollo, then Shuttle, the Commercial Crew Program, which Kayla flew up as a part of, and soon Artemis. Let's go now to NASA's Jasmine Hopkins.
Thank you so much, Megan. We're here in the Launch Control Center amid all the excitement in Firing Room 2, and I'm so glad right now to be joined by our Kennedy Space Center Director, Janet Petro, and our Deputy Director as well, Kelvin Manning. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you, Jasmine.
Hi, Jasmine.
We are so glad to have you. This team has overcome a lot to get to today. We are no stranger to storms on the Space Coast. We overcame Ian, and then Nicole. Janet, how did we embrace the challenge?
That's my line, Jasmine.
Yeah.
I got to say, I couldn't be more proud of the team out here. Everything we did to get to this point, and then to have those 2 storms thrown at us at the last minute. Nicole, all the evacuations. As you know, one time we remained at the pad, and the other time we had to roll back to the VAB. But I got to tell you, across the workforce, whether it was our program people, across the agency, our institutional support organizations, they all came together and worked as a team. And so here we are tonight, looking forward to a great launch.
Right, we're a very strong team, and we have been at this for years, for decades. We started off during the Apollo program, but now we've evolved into what we're calling a multi-user spaceport. Kelvin, what does that mean?
So when we were getting ready to retire the space shuttle, a lot of people thought we were going out of business, literally shutting down. But our leadership team, we had a vision to create what we called a multi-user spaceport to become the world's premier government and commercial spaceport. And so that's happened over the last 10 or so years, probably a lot faster than we thought it would. But right, if you would say, you ask us, well, what's the future look like? I'll tell you, we're just getting started.
Right, the future is very bright for us, and this is a really big day for NASA. I mean, Artemis launch, but an even bigger year for Kennedy Space Center, the Diamond Anniversary, our 60th anniversary. Janet, how have we commemorated that big milestone?
Oh, we've had a whole bunch of celebrations all along this year. As you know, Kennedy became a center back in 1962. As you said, we've been celebrating all year long, and I can't think of a better way of culminating our Diamond Anniversary with a launch of the Artemis for the Artemis generation later this evening.
Right, that is so exciting. And what does it mean for both of you to be leading the center at one of our busiest cadences we've ever seen? We've had over 40 launches this year alone. What has that been like?
We're gonna get past 50 tonight, I think. But for me, I'm incredibly honored to be leading this team. It really is all about the team and the workforce. We have such a highly skilled, a highly dedicated, a highly motivated workforce. We have an incredible mission, and we all come together and embrace it.
And it's not about us. Like Janet said, it's about the people.
It really is. It's about this great team. Janet, Kelvin, thank you both so much for being here tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jasmine. Go Artemis.
Yes, go Artemis.
Go Artemis.
Absolutely. Megan, back to you.
Great to hear from them. So 1 hour and 48 minutes and counting till our 2-hour launch window opens. We heard Dale report out that there is a team at the pad working an issue. So why don't we go back to him now to see if he has an update for us.
Yeah, Megan, now continuing to track the Red Crew's work at the launch pad. This is a specially trained team of 3 individuals, 2 technicians, 1 safety representative who are currently right now inside the mobile launcher at the base of the launch pad. They are doing work on a replenish valve, currently torquing down the bolts in order to remedy a leak in that replenish valve that was detected a little over an hour ago. Now, this is significant because currently with a leak, they have had to go into what's called stop flow on the liquid hydrogen tank of the core stage. Normally, under replenish, they continue to flow liquid hydrogen into the tank as it boils off in order to maintain a level of around 100%, but that has been in stop flow, and so at this moment, we are slowly losing liquid hydrogen in the core stage hydrogen tank. The Red Crew went in and is currently working a little longer than expected on the issue. It was estimated that it would take 15 minutes to do the work, but as we're now finding out, the Red Crew is torquing down the bolts and then backing out of the area and allowing the launch team to cycle the valves to test to see if they've got that leak fixed. So as they do this, we understand they will cycle this work, go in, cycle the valves, torque them down again if it continues to leak, and then back out and test the work. And this may continue until they have it fixed. The red crew going onto the launch pad isn't a totally uncommon occurrence, certainly new with the Artemis program, but work like this was done in previous space programs. The red crew is specially trained for this work. They are accustomed to working around in hazardous operation, especially a fully tanked rocket. Again, we are tracking Red Crew's operation out at the pad. It's expected that this will eat into the launch window, which currently we have liftoff at 1:04 a.m. Eastern Time, but the window runs 2 hours to 3:04 a.m. Eastern Time. Again, monitoring the Red Crew's work. We'll have more updates for you a little later on. For now, back to you, Megan.
Thank you, Daryl. Some quick programming notes. For the first time ever, we are broadcasting a launch in 4K. You can watch it on NASA's YouTube channel or check your local provider to see if you have NASA's UHD channel. The audio of our broadcast is also available on the local amateur VHF and UHF radio frequencies you see at the bottom of your screen. So if you're here along the Space Coast and interested in that, make note of those frequencies now. Or you can watch today's launch with live commentary in Spanish. That broadcast starts at midnight on NASA en Español's YouTube page, which we're showing you now at the bottom of your screen. Now, Kayla, why did NASA choose the name Artemis for our return to the moon?
Well, in Greek mythology, Artemis is the twin sister of Apollo. So it's really a connection back to the Apollo era, the amazing things we did as part of the Apollo program. It's a new set of missions. We're with new objectives. So it's a connection to the past with an eye towards what we might do as part of the Artemis generation.
Yeah, let's talk about what those future ambitions might be. I mean, landing the first woman and first person of color on the lunar surface, that is a worthwhile ambition.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think we've come a long way since Apollo in so many ways in the space program, but one of the ways we've evolved is our astronaut corps more closely reflects the nation it represents now.
Sure.
So those crews will be more diverse, and we think those diverse perspectives, not only in our astronaut corps, but our larger team, only make us a stronger one.
Yeah, all right. Well, coming up, we are going to hear from some of the Apollo astronauts and learn more about what we will accomplish for humanity by going back to the moon. We'll meet some of the women shattering glass ceilings to bring Artemis to life, including NASA's first female launch director. We'll also show you the Space Launch System up close and what happens when the cutest group of visitors gets the surprise of a lifetime. Plus, we'll take you around the world to show you how people are marking this historic mission. And Kayla and I will also take your questions live. You can send those our way by using the hashtag Artemis. We already have some questions from some celebrities. I know you're going to love these questions. So you're going to have to keep watching to find out who sent those in. And we also invite you to share your moon-inspired content using the hashtag NASA MoonSnap. Here's a sample of some that's already been sent in. This one's beautiful. The flower in the foreground there, the moon in the background illuminated so beautifully.
Here's an awesome one. It looks like we have an eagle here flying over the moon. Just beautiful. It's been really cool to see all these artistic submissions.
Oh yeah, really creative. And we're going to compile as many as we can and show them later in the broadcast. Now, let's check back in with Daryl. We do like to check in with him as much as possible to see if we can get any updates from the launch team. Go ahead, Daryl.
Yeah, Megan, we just saw the red team give a thumbs up to the camera as they are doing their work out at the launch pad. Currently, they're torquing down some bolts to the specification required in order to try and stop what has been described as an intermittent hydrogen leak in the area. It went above the 1% threshold, and so that is a violation of the HAZGAS limit in that area. The team continuing to work. As you look at the rocket on the pad, they were called out to the pad about a half hour ago, and they appeared to be making their way, at least have stepped back from the area of work. The way that the workflow has been going is they torque down the bolts, step back a little bit. The launch team then cycles the valves to check to see if the leak is still there, and then they come back in, and this has happened a couple of times, and start torquing the bolts again. The rocket was nearly fully tanked. The core stage was in replenish for both hydrogen and oxygen. The upper stage had nearly been finished when the leak was detected, and the countdown, though it is continuing, the rocket, the leak had to be addressed in order for the launch to proceed. The replenish puts the hydrogen back into the tank after it boils off, and so currently we're in a stop flow which no longer allows a replenishment of the hydrogen tank, and that would not allow us to have a launch without those tanks being in total replenish, and also in a vented configuration, which has also been put on hold. I'm sorry, not a vented configuration, but rather an engine bleed has been stopped. And so that would need to continue as well in order to get the engines conditioned for launch. That's the latest here from Firing Room 1 at the Launch Control Center. Megan, will send it back to you.
Thank you, Daryl. 1 hour, 41 minutes until, again, the planned start of the 2-hour launch window. Right now, let's head over to the Apollo Saturn V Center at Kennedy Space Center's Visitor Complex, where NASA's Dan Hewitt is just inside in front of a Saturn V rocket, which is the only vehicle to date to carry humans beyond low Earth orbit. He's going to show us what he has behind us there, the moon board. It's an interactive tool.
Yeah, thanks, Megan, and welcome everybody. We're in the Saturn V Center, fitting that the rocket that carried astronauts to the moon of Apollo is just over our shoulder as we meet the rocket that's going to do it with the next generation under Artemis. So SLS, the Space Launch System, is out on the pad right now. It's on the mobile launcher. Before we jump into that, just to give you some perspective, so that valve that Daryl's been talking about is in the base section of this mobile launcher down here. That's different from the areas we were focused on in August and September in these 33-foot-tall tail service mast umbilicals that are delivering the hydrogen and oxygen to the core stage of SLS. But let's jump right in. A couple of key components to SLS. We're going to start here on the sides with the solid rocket boosters. If they look familiar, they're derived from those that flew the space shuttle. In fact, some of the segments of these boosters today were flown on previous space shuttle missions. We call them solids because of the type of propellant inside. If you were able to look in, you would see a mix of ammonium perchlorate, aluminum powder, and a binding agent called polybutadiene acrylonitrile. That's your expert vocabulary word for the day. Now, as these are firing, they're providing more than 90% of the steering and 75% of the thrust as SLS makes its way uphill. And those are attached to the core stage, 212 feet tall, 5 major sections. We're going to start at the fun part down here on the bottom. 4 RS-25 engines, again, derived from those that flew the space shuttle. In addition, we have this core engine section here where we have all of their necessary plumbing, also the connection points where we're feeding the propellants into the core stage itself. And as these are firing, each one providing up to 500,000 pounds of thrust during operation, consuming 1,500 gallons of propellant every second as they go uphill. Now, these are liquid rocket engines, which means you need a fuel, about 500,000 gallons of liquid hydrogen, and an oxidizer, about 200,000 of liquid oxygen up here. That hydrogen gets fed through feed lines down at the bottom of the tank here. The oxygen coming from these 2 feed lines you see running down out of this, the intertank section. The intertank also has the upper attachment points for the solid rocket boosters. The bottom attaches down here at the engine block. Now all the way up top we have the forward skirt. It's where you have your core avionics, your brains for flying SLS, as well as connections to the mobile launcher and some antennas. And if we zoom in, why does it look all bumpy? We have a spray-on insulation on the core stage. These propellants are stored at cryogenic temperatures, hundreds of degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. And so we have to try and keep them as cold as possible. Now, underneath this upper skirt, we have the second stage, the Interim Cryogenic Propulsion Stage, or ICPS. This is a modified upper stage from the Delta IV family of rockets from United Launch Alliance. Single RL-10B-2 engine, also propelled by liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen. This is used for our in-space propulsion maneuvers. Critically, that translunar injection, which is going to give us the energy to go beyond low Earth orbit and head out to the moon. Altogether, that's the Space Launch System. It's going to be making its first flight, hopefully today. It's going to be a heck of a show. Let's get back to the countdown. I'll send it over to you, Megan.
Thanks, Dan. 1 hour, 37 minutes and counting until our 2-hour launch window opens tonight. The Space Launch System rocket and Orion spacecraft together, standing just taller than the Statue of Liberty at Launch Pad 39B. It's the culmination of years of development and thousands of tests. Here's a look at its path to the pad.
The Space Launch System is really the backbone of the Artemis missions. It's the truck, it's the big carry vehicle.
It allows us to carry both crew as well as the equipment that we need to live and work on the moon.
60 years ago, NASA was in a race to get to the moon. This time is more than just a race. It's about establishing a long-term presence.
Can you imagine rolling the Statue of Liberty out to put at the pad? That's what we're doing.
It will lift up from Earth with more power than the Saturn V, which was the first vehicle to take us to the moon.
Artemis is our next giant leap.
The difference between the Apollo program and the Artemis program is really the focus on sustainability and using the moon as an outpost for further exploration.
This time, we're going back to learn how to live and work on the moon.
The Space Launch System really is the culmination of our knowledge for 60 years of building rockets.
We started by looking at over 1,700 different potential components that would go into the rocket, and by looking at the way we could reuse some of the most reliable equipment that was flown on the shuttle.
We took those and we put them together into a system that had enough energy to make sense to do the mission that we've been asked to do.
We're moving from low Earth orbit, like you see in the International Space Station today, to moving beyond that, to taking the next step in exploration.
It's 322 feet tall. It's got 700,000 gallons of cryogenic propellant in the core stage alone. It can produce 8.8 million pounds of vacuum thrust. The Space Launch System is really a national rocket, a national asset too.
We have worked with contractors as well as with our NASA experts, our science and engineering department, our safety and mission assurance team.
To get the Space Launch System designed, developed, and produced, it has taken thousands of companies across the country.
It comes together by train, it comes together by plane, it comes together by barges.
So all of that culminates at the Kennedy Space Center for the launch of the first Artemis mission.
Everybody has worked together to ensure that we have a safe and reliable rocket.
At NASA, safety and testing is extremely important because ultimately this rocket isn't meant just to carry cargo, it's meant to carry people.
It takes all types of education, all types of backgrounds, all types of diversity to do the things we do, and it'll be great to see a diverse crew land on the moon.
Where the Space Launch System comes in is providing that reliable transportation so that we can start flying these rockets on a routine basis to take people and to take payload to that outpost, the moon, and also the gateway system.
We have a generation who've never seen deep space exploration, and this will give them an opportunity to see that this is something that they can potentially do themselves.
It's going to be a paradigm shift for NASA. We're going to be back to looking at things that nobody's ever done before.
A lot to look forward to, and it all begins with launch. Afterwards, our friends at Johnson Space Center in Houston will control Orion once it's on its way to the moon. Let's get an update of operations there with NASA's Leah Cheshire.
Thanks, Megan, and welcome to Mission Control Houston, home of the red, white, and blue flight control rooms. But today we're in the white flight control room, which is just across the hall from where you usually see us in the International Space Station flight control room, like this morning when we conducted a spacewalk outside the space station. Now, this white flight control room has been used before during some space station missions, plus commanding Boeing's Starliner. Previously, this room was used for space shuttle missions and was renovated in 2014 to support our use with the Artemis program. Today's flight director is Judd Freeling, a flight director of 11 years who will lead the team through the ascent portion of the mission. After Freeling's shift today, flight director Rick LeBrode will lead the team through the rest of the mission all the way to entry and splashdown when Freeling will step in again. Other console members will be monitoring the various systems on Orion like propulsion, solar arrays, and trajectory, and they arrived on console about 5 hours ago. And you might also be surprised to learn that there is indeed a Capcom or capsule communicator on console today as well. While there are no crew on board, Jay Marshke and other capsule communicators will be training throughout the mission in preparation for Artemis II and beyond. The Capcom is the single person in the room who speaks with the crew, gathering info from mission control team and keeping streamlined communication with the astronauts in space. We're counting down to liftoff when teams here will really jump into action and monitor the first Artemis flight, sending Orion further than any crew-rated spacecraft has gone before. But for now, Megan and Kayla will send it back to you at Kennedy Space Center to keep walking us through the events of the day.
Well, you just heard Leah remind us that no one is inside Orion today. Again, it's because Artemis I is a flight test to prove we can safely return crew from lunar orbit on Artemis II. And when we launch the first crewed mission, NASA has a very diverse and talented core to choose from, including Kayla here. We're looking at video now of some of your friends who got to go to the pad. That looks fun.
Yeah, it's always so exciting to see the rocket on the pad because you know you're getting close to launch. So we're all just really excited to see how this test goes today.
I wish I could have gone out there with them. You and me, what happened? We didn't get our invite. And I thought this was fun too. Some of your friends also got to fly over the pad in T-38s. Here's video of that now, incredible video. So these flyovers were common during shuttle, right?
Yeah, and we still try to do them whenever we can. We actually use the T-38 jet as a training platform. It's a chance for us to practice making real-world decisions in a high-risk environment, practice working as a team, and a good analog for spaceflight.
Okay.
But we also like to fly by the pad when we can, when we have a rocket out there. It's a way of saluting and thanking the team for all the work it took to get to this moment.
That's great. Yeah, a worthwhile thing to do because, yes, the team has worked so hard to get to this moment. And you spoke about training. Has training already started for Artemis II for you guys?
We've been developing the training, but the crews aren't assigned yet, so they're not in dedicated training flows yet. But our team at Johnson Space Center, where we train for human spaceflight, are working on all of the things that we're going to need to teach the crew and the best ways to go about that. Once we get that crew assigned, they'll be straight into training right up until launch day.
Awesome. Cool, cool, cool. All right, I can't wait to hear who gets assigned. And the absence of crew today doesn't mean Orion is empty. There are plenty of other interesting things flying on Artemis I, including several technology demonstrations and science investigations we're going to show you throughout the broadcast. There are also some mementos like these seeds that we have right here, right, Kayla?
Yeah, we have an example of the moon seeds that will be flying as part of this mission today. And the idea actually comes from an Apollo 14 astronaut, Stuart Roosa, who flew seeds with him to the moon, hundreds of them, and then brought them back to Earth. And then they were planted all over the country and the world, and they're called moon trees. And so we're kind of carrying on with that idea on Orion for this launch.
Yeah, I love that. And the seeds that are flying on Artemis I, it's going to come back and they're going to distribute it to a number of organizations through NASA's STEM program. So it's really a neat idea. And so these moon seeds are part of what's inside Artemis I's official flight kit, along with more than 10,000 other mementos, like this Apollo 8 commemorative medal you see here, a nod to 1968 when humans first orbited the moon, and a bolt from Apollo 11, 1969, when humans first landed on the moon. Those items are on loan to us from the National Air and Space Museum, and once back on Earth, will be exhibited there, so you can check them out. There are also a variety of flags, pins, and patches like these Artemis I patches that will be distributed to people who contributed to this flight. Now, NASA spacecraft, both crewed and uncrewed, have carried mementos like these since the 1960s. Astronauts are also allowed their own personal flight kit. So I was wondering, what did you bring with you for your Crew 3 mission?
I actually brought a couple of examples to show you. The moon seeds inspired me to share that I actually brought some vegetable seeds with
awesome.
me. So these are kind of fun. They're dragon themed, so I got dragon carrots and dragon beans since I went up on a SpaceX Crew Dragon vehicle.
Sure.
And then of course, I think the most important, meaningful thing to all of us is usually pictures of our family and friends. So have like a picture
family.
of me and my family at my sister's wedding. Friends backpacking in Alberta, Canada, and then my in-laws.
Right side up.
together on a family vacation. And I also brought some flags, some American flags, and then United States Navy flags, since I'm a naval officer. So things like that, I think it's just so human to want to bring stuff with you, right? Souvenirs, who doesn't love that?
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think for most of us, pictures of our family and friends, things that connect us back home, are the most important.
Yeah, 6 months might not sound like a long time for people, but it is, right? Wouldn't you say? And you're also so far, it's nice to have those tangible things that remind you of home.
Absolutely. Yeah, really important for us.
Cool. Thank you for bringing those. It was really fun to look at. All right, 1 hour, 27 minutes and counting until launch. And we have our first questions from social media. So let's take a look at the clip here. Kayla, you're going to notice a familiar, handsome face.
Hey there, I'm Chris Evans, and I play Buzz Lightyear in Pixar's Lightyear movie. I was wondering, when we fly future Artemis missions with astronauts, how many people can fly on board the Orion capsule at once?
My nephew's probably asleep, but he's a big Buzz Lightyear fan, so he's probably going to enjoy watching that question tomorrow. But we can get 4 astronauts in the Orion space capsule. It's a little bit bigger than the Apollo capsule, about 30% more habitable volume. And so instead of supporting 3 crew for about 2 weeks, Orion can support 4 crew for about 21 days.
Okay, good. Good first question. Let's take a second question now. Can a microbiologist be an astronaut?
Absolutely, and we already have microbiologists who are astronauts, like my training classmate, Zena Cardman. So yeah, we hire people from all sorts of different backgrounds. All you have to do is have a STEM degree. Beyond that, you can come from any pathway. So some of us are military astronauts like me, either aviation or I'm a submariner, but we have a ton of people from different scientific and engineering communities, including microbiologists.
Yeah, I love that it's so diverse, because I think diversity really adds to what you guys can do.
Yeah, and those unique perspectives, I think, make us stronger as a team whenever we're tackling a new problem. Having people with different, not only academic backgrounds, but all of these scientists, a lot of them have different field experience. So like Zena worked in some really extreme environments in Antarctica, in caves, doing a lot of her research. So it's not that different than what we're hoping to do at the South Pole of the moon. So these perspectives are really important for us to form the best team that we can.
Yeah, that's interesting. All right, I think we have time for one more question, so why don't we pull one up? What is the coolest part about Artemis to you?
I mean, I think I can't even quite get my head around how it might feel for the crew to orbit the moon on Artemis 2 and see it up close. And then, of course, on Artemis 3 to actually land on the moon and conduct a moonwalk. It's just going to be incredible to have that view back of our home planet. And so just the thought of sending human beings back to the moon, it's just super exciting for all of us.
I honestly didn't know how you're going to answer that, because there is so many things to look forward to pinpoint, the thing that you're most excited about. I thought that was going to be a hard question, actually. All right, so great questions. Keep them coming using #Artemis wherever you're watching this broadcast, and keep sending those moon-inspired content too. Again, that's #NASA MoonSnap, and we're going to show some of them later in the broadcast. Okay, 1 hour, 24 minutes and counting until hopefully liftoff of Artemis 1, and it's time for another update with NASA's Daryl Nail, who's with the launch team as they were monitoring a leak.
Yeah, that's right, Megan. We're inside the firing room number 1 here at the Launch Control Center at the Kennedy Space Center. And currently we have an update on that red crew, which went out to the pad to torque down some bolts on a leaky hydrogen replenish valve for the core stage. And that update is that the red crew has departed the blast danger area. They have completed their work. They got the go at 10 p.m. this evening, 10 p.m. Eastern Time, to go out and conduct work that took roughly an hour from the time they were given the go till the time they left the blast danger area. The technicians, 2 technicians and 1 safety representative, did the work out at the pad on the replenish valve. And now that they are on their way back, the team is now examining the work and whether or not that leak is still there. What we do know is, you may have heard me mention that this put the liquid hydrogen tank into stop flow, and as a result also stopped a required 90-minute engine bleed for the liquid hydrogen side. Teams have come to the conclusion that only a 45-minute bleed is required at this point. They can resume the bleed at the point that they left off, and it'll be enough to meet that requirement for launch. You're looking now at a graphic where we're tracking the core stage fill rate. We did this earlier this evening. Took about 4 hours and 20 minutes to fill the core stage. You can see on the left that the core stage liquid oxygen is at 100%. That's the same for the upper stage, and both are in stable replenish. As you can look to the right, though, you can see that we're at 97% for liquid hydrogen. The reason for that is because when we went into stop flow, that means that the replenish was no longer refilling the tank, and that liquid hydrogen was boiling off and draining some of the capacity out of that particular tank. So we've lost some liquid hydrogen. The plan is to resume, of course, the filling of liquid hydrogen, which goes into that into the liquid hydrogen tank on the core stage and then vents out on that flare stack that you see to the right, where excess hydrogen is burned off. That's the latest here from Firing Room 1. Megan, we'll send it back to you.
Thank you, Daryl. All right, let's go back inside our Apollo Saturn V Center now with NASA's Dan Hewitt. We last sent humans to the moon using the rocket behind you. Can you show us how we're going back now with Artemis?
Absolutely. Thanks, Megan. So Artemis 1 is going to take us from planet Earth around the moon and all the way back, and I'm going to show you every step of the way. Like every great space mission, it starts with a launch. In this case, 4 RS-25 engines, 2 solid rocket boosters ignite, sending SLS and Orion into the sky. On the way uphill, we'll have a number of jettison events, things coming off the rocket. One of the most visible, these 2 large solid rocket boosters, a little over 2 minutes into flight, will break away. We'll also have the launch abort system come off once we're high enough, and then 3 fairings, which are protecting Orion's capsule and service module during the flight through the thicker parts of the atmosphere. Now, after the core stage has consumed its propellants, we'll hear MECO, main engine cutoff. Those 4 engines will cut off. The core stage will drop away, handing over propulsion duties to this, the interim cryogenic propulsion stage. Its first job is a perigee raise maneuver. Perigee just means the lowest point of your orbit. This will give us a nice circular path for Orion around our planet. While it's there, we can really check the spacecraft out, make sure everything from electrical systems, guidance, navigation, and control, communications are all functioning before we commit it to heading to the moon. And we do that with this, the trans-lunar injection. This will be about an 18-minute firing on today's timeline, and this is done to give us enough energy to get out of low Earth orbit and make our way to the moon. Shortly after that, the ICPS will separate. It'll do a disposal burn, sending it around the moon and into an orbit around the sun. But from there on out, propulsion duties get handed over to the European service module. It's going to make a couple of outbound trajectory correction burns on the way out, critically testing that orbital maneuvering system engine, that large one on the very bottom that's going to be needed when we start making our maneuvers around the moon to get into what's known as distant retrograde orbit, or DRO. To do that, we're going to do the outbound powered flyby, dipping in about 70 or 80 miles off the lunar surface, really pushing with that large engine. That's going to slingshot us around. We're going to do a final orbit insertion maneuver, and then we will be in DRO, distant retrograde orbit, this dotted line right here. Distant, we're about 40,000 miles off the lunar surface, and retrograde because the moon orbits the Earth in a counterclockwise fashion. We're going to be going clockwise, opposite retrograde. It's a very stable orbit, doesn't require a lot of energy to maintain your space there, really lets us put Orion through the paces, learn about using this spacecraft in deep space. But eventually it'll be time to come home. We'll fire up the engines once more, do a departure burn. This is what commits us from departing the moon and heading back home. We'll dip in close to the surface once more for the return transit as we target a splashdown in the Pacific Ocean. Before that happens, the spacecraft separate. The European service module's job is done. It drops away to burn up, revealing the heat shield. This is goal number 1 for this flight, is testing that heat shield at lunar return velocities, because when we hit the upper atmosphere, we're going to be moving more than 20,000 miles an hour, heating that up to more than 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So really need to make sure that that can withstand that heat of reentry. After it makes it through, parachutes deploy, Orion splashes down in the Pacific. A Navy ship and other recovery assets are standing by to pick it up out of the water and bring it in to the first mission in the Artemis program. So that's all still going to unfold. It all starts with launch today, though, so let's get back to the countdown. Over to you, Megan.
Our return to the moon would not be possible without our partners across the country and the world. So joining us now is Frank Davina, head of ESA's European Astronaut Center. Good evening to you.
Good evening.
Well, so I want to ask you, talk to me about Airbus and how that company and ESA contributed to the Orion spacecraft.
Well, Airbus is of course the lead manufacturer and integrator of the service module of our Orion capsule, and that will fly to the moon. So this is a very important part, of course, because without the service module, it's clear that we would not get to the moon or would not be able to return from it. So it's a very important partner for ESA, but there are industries across Europe, not only Airbus, but across Europe, that are contributing to the service module in Italy, in France, Belgium. Really, it's a really European project.
Yeah.
Frank, we've been close partners, NASA and the European Space Agency, for decades now, and partnering on things like the space station, scientific exploration, and of course commercial crew missions. Matthias Maurer, ESA astronaut extraordinaire, was on my crew, Crew 3. Can you tell us a little bit more about what makes these partnerships so important?
Well, it's important, these partnerships, because we want to do sustainable exploration of the moon. We want to explore space on a sustainable way. And I think partnerships in that sense are essential. One nation alone, could they do it? The US maybe yes. Europe certainly could not participate to a lunar program by themselves or could not do it by themselves. But I think if we do it as a partnership, we can go a lot further, we can do a lot more. We can leverage technologies, we can leverage talent in all these countries across the globe that can really push the partnership forward.
So looking ahead to future Artemis missions, we're going to have ESA astronauts on board those. Have you guys begun preparing for that training, anything like that?
We have actually started preparing already for lunar missions, surface missions. We have a program called Pangea in ESA, which is basically, there are NASA astronauts participating in those trainings. Stephanie was just over with us just 1 week ago, doing field trips, and we are actually starting to prepare to see also which technologies do we need to use that we can at the best possible way do science on the moon, because of course we just do not go there to walk around or do two things. We want to do real science, we want to do discoveries, we want to live there for a sustainable way. So which technologies do we need? And that we are actually starting already in the European Astronaut Center. We actually started already more than 5 years ago developing this training program. So yes, we are involved again together with our NASA colleagues and colleagues from the international partners to start preparing crew to really do sustainable surface exploration of the moon.
Yeah. And you guys are doing more than just crew, right? You guys are contributing to the Artemis programs in other ways?
We are contributing to the Artemis program in many ways. Of course, the service module that we will see launching here hopefully today is the biggest part today. But we are looking into a lot of other capabilities. First of all, there is the gateway. That will be a real element to enable the sustainable exploration of the moon. We have the communication system on the gateway, we have the IHAP, the habitation module, we have Esprit, which is a refueling module, which is essential if you want to sustain the gateway there for a longer period of time. Of course, you need to be able to refuel the system. So these are essential elements, again, that ESA is providing. We're also providing small technology experiments, radiation, for example, will be very important. We are looking in crew exercise device for the gateway. We are looking into medical systems. So these are also small components, but for the crew that are very important because we need to keep the crew healthy there, of course.
You're a great partner. You have so much that you're contributing. We really appreciate it.
We have a lot that we can contribute. And,
Thank you.
And of course in this ministerial, because we have now our ministerial conference coming up next week, where the big decisions are going to be made for the next decade. And there we will propose a European lander that will bring logistics to the moon. And this logistics capability that will be a big part of the integrated Artemis program will allow us to have European astronauts actually walking on the moon. So that is really interesting for us.
Wow, Frank, thank you so much, and we continue to look forward to the contributions that we can make together with this partnership. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and good morning to the viewers in Europe.
Thank you so much. All right, and speaking of viewers, we have a ton of people out here on along the space coast of Florida watching today's launch. So let's head on over to NASA's Leah Martin. She's over at the Visitor Center with a whole bunch of excited people.
Oh my goodness, Megan. You know, this normally is a time of night that people are winding down and getting ready for bed, but there is not a single person here who has sleep on their mind. Everybody is so excited, on the edge of their seat, trading stories, talking about previous launches and being excited for this one. And I'm actually joined here by 3 women who are thrilled to come out and watch tonight's launch. What does it mean to be out here and see this historic launch tonight?
It's an amazing moment. I grew up on the Space Coast watching launches, and so to be out here tonight, it's incredible. It's an amazing feeling to be out with all of these people celebrating, and we're super excited to be here.
And Isabel, I know that you said that you have been having your eyes on this launch. You've been watching on the previous attempts. What does it mean for you to be here tonight?
Well, yeah, this is our 3rd attempt here. We were here for the 1st and 2nd here at Banana Creek, so we're really excited. The energy out here is electrifying, and we can't wait to see this thing go off.
Now, this is the first of a series of missions that are becoming increasingly more complex. What are you most excited about for the Artemis missions?
Leah, I am so excited to be here. I just feel so honored because, as you know, this isn't just a momentous launch for humanity as a whole. It's so important for gender and cultural minorities across the globe because Artemis is landing the first woman and the first person of color on the surface of the moon. This is this generation's Apollo. And so all of the people who didn't have the opportunity to live through Apollo and be inspired by that have the opportunity today to witness it. And I'm just so grateful to be here. I can't wait to see the positive impact.
One more question. This is going to be something that you guys, I'm sure, will remember for your entire lives. How are you marking this? Do you have any special plans of capturing these memories and being able to pass them on to people in your life?
Well, my son is growing up here. I didn't grow up here, and so he's going to grow up here on the Space Coast, and I just can't wait for him to just grow up with the Artemis missions.
Well, Megan, we're out here. We have our eye to the sky, and we can't wait to see it go. Back to you.
Really great interviews, and wow, I saw that drone shot that we had showing all of the bleachers filled with people there to watch the launch. That was incredible. If you're just joining us, welcome to NASA's live launch coverage of Artemis I, our return to the moon in almost 50 years. I'm NASA's Megan Cruz, and this is NASA astronaut Kayla Barron, who flew on NASA's SpaceX Crew 3 National Space Station for about 6 months. I gotta ask you, how was that experience?
It was incredible. We had such an amazing time up there. The Expedition 66 crew was awesome. I've been saying since I got back that we're the happiest crew in the history of the space station, and nobody's been able to really challenge me on that yet.
You guys look very happy in that photo.
Oh man, we were just like a family up there executing an incredible mission. Some amazing science experiments. We got to do 3 spacewalks. It was just, you couldn't have planned a perfect first mission for me, Matthias, and Raja, and of course our veterans up there, Mark and Tom. It was amazing. We had an incredible time.
Yeah. Wow, look at that photo of you in the cupola. That is amazing.
Yeah, the views are beautiful. It's just like every time you look out the window, it takes your breath away.
Wow. And now here you are adding some valuable insight into Artemis I. This is our 3rd opportunity to launch NASA's brand new Space Launch System rocket and Orion spacecraft. This is an uncrewed flight test to pave the way for future crewed missions, starting with Artemis II. And Kayla, you could be chosen to fly on some of those future missions. How does that make you feel?
Honestly, it's a little unbelievable to me. I could barely imagine what it'd be like to go to the space station until I did it. And just thinking about what it would be like to look back at the Earth from orbit around the moon or even standing on the moon kind of blows my mind.
Wow.
So yeah, it's hard to even imagine that that's true, but it's a really special time to be at NASA and an even more special time to be in the astronaut office.
Yeah, that's a beautiful picture of you seeing the moon, right?
Yeah, that's sort of a moon spotting adventure there. I've got binoculars. One thing that's really cool about seeing stars and the moon from orbit is you're not looking at them through the atmosphere. So you get these very clear views. And the moon is always super spherical. You never get these like sort of slices that look kind of flat from Earth. Up there, you see it in 3D, it feels like.
Wow.
So yeah, I think we all sort of fall in love with the moon from space in a whole new way.
Yeah. Well, today's launch attempt comes amid a very busy year for us at NASA. Some of the highlights include 2 more commercial crew launches with SpaceX, Crew 4 in April, you're seeing there, and Crew 5 last month. In May, NASA and Boeing flew OFT-2, the second uncrewed flight test of the Starliner capsule. The goal is to certify the capsule for regular flights to the International Space Station after a crewed flight test next year. In July, we released the first images captured by our James Webb Space Telescope, and wow, they are magnificent. Pictures like these could help us answer some of astronomy's biggest questions about how our universe began. And then in September, we intentionally slammed the DART spacecraft into asteroid Dimorphos and successfully changed its course. The asteroid wasn't headed for Earth, that's important to say, but the test was to show that we could defend our planet if needed. And recently, 2 other missions that benefit the Artemis program. Last week, we tested a new inflatable heat shield that could help us eventually land humans on Mars. And just 2 days ago, Capstone arrived at its intended orbit around the moon. The small satellite launched from New Zealand in June and will now test the unique lunar orbit for a future space station there. You heard us talk about a gateway. Now, Kayla, what do you think about all that NASA is accomplishing?
I mean, those are all just amazing examples of why it's such a cool time to be part of human spaceflight and the larger space program. We're learning so much, not only about our home planet, but our galaxy and the universe. Like those James Webb images just capture my imagination every time they release a new set.
Yes.
And so we have a lot going on and a lot to be excited about right now.
I hope people are following along for it because it is truly great, and we want people to share along with that. So, all right, 1 hour, 6 minutes and counting from liftoff of Artemis I. Let's head back to the Launch Control Center with Daryl Nail.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. And so we get an update for you now. The Red Crew, of course, completed its work on torquing down the bolts for that replenish valve on the core stage hydrogen side. And now we are back in replenish for core stage hydrogen, which is good news. The team now looking to work on that upper stage, and we understand for the update to the NASA test director, they just informed the NTD that they can start getting back the flow on the upper stage as well. It went into a stop flow roughly around 10 p.m. Eastern time after a leak was detected. You can see the core stage status there. The liquid oxygen side is in stable replenish, both for the core stage and the upper stage of the rocket. Over on the right side, you can see we've lost some hydrogen since going into a stop flow that allowed some liquid hydrogen to boil off during about an hour or so while a Red Crew was sent out to the launch pad to make repairs. Now, the hydrogen bleed for the engines was reestablished, and it looks like the team is back on track to recover that after a stop flow halted the bleed. They are required to bleed that liquid hydrogen through the RS-25 engines for 90 minutes, but they're picking up where they left off, and that appears to be on track. In the meantime, we've had an update from the range, and the range has informed the NASA test director that currently at the moment, if we were to launch now, they are no-go due to the loss of signal on a radar site. That's currently being worked right now. Again, the range advising the NASA test director that they are no-go. The range is not clear for launch until they remedy that issue on their radar site. In the meantime, we started this at 3:23 p.m. Eastern Time. Got the core stage tanked in about 4 hours and 23 minutes, and now looking to get everything back on track to try to make that launch window at 1:04 a.m. all the way to 3 a.m. Eastern Time. That's the latest from the firing room. Megan.
Board the Orion spacecraft for this flight test, but there are some passengers there with very important missions.
Inside the Orion spacecraft, as we fly around the moon, we have some cool experiments going on to help us understand what the environment is like.
Although there's no humans aboard Artemis I, we do have a few special passengers aboard that will help us pave the way for future Artemis missions.
So there's basically 3 occupants riding. You can kind of think about it like 3 astronauts. We have a moonican. We will also have 2 torsos that are learning about the moon and learning about the environment for our astronauts before they go.
We have a mannequin on Artemis I. We call him our moonican for short.
That moonican is called Commander Moonican Campos.
The name is actually in homage to Arturo Campos,
who was an important person who helped bring the Apollo 13 capsule home. The moonican will sit in the commander's seat, and it will wear a suit just like our astronauts will wear.
Moonican Campos is actually weighted to simulate an actual human aboard the Orion spacecraft.
So it will help us understand what our astronauts will experience as they go to the moon and home.
The Orion Crew Survival System suit and the Orion seat were designed simultaneously to fit together as a seamless package. The actual design of the suit was built into the Orion seat such that when they're in the suit, in the seat, it is a true cocoon of protection for them. During this test flight, the seat will actually be instrumented with accelerometers.
Sensors that tell us how much the chair is shaking during launch and re-entry and how many G-forces or gravitational forces it experiences.
We expect Commander Moonican Campos to have a very exciting ride on his way to orbit. The thrill of launch, the experience of weightlessness, the excitement of landing. What we learn on Artemis I with our mannequins assistants will help us better understand how a human will actually behave in the seat, both for landing and for launch to allow us to ensure their safety.
In addition to the moonican, we'll have 2 seats that have basically what's like a human dummy, an upper torso that are detecting how much radiation they're experiencing.
It's called the Matryoshka Astrorad Radiation Experiment, MARE. MARE is an international collaboration with German Aerospace Center, DLR, and with Israel Space Agency. The MARE experiment consists of 2 anthropomorphic phantoms called Helga and Zohar that are simulating a female body in a space radiation environment.
One of those will be wearing, we hope, will help protect our astronauts from radiation.
Each one of the 2 phantoms will be equipped with about 20 battery-operated radiation instruments.
So between the 2, we'll be able to determine how well we can protect our astronauts from radiation events.
Space radiation is a mix of high-energy, heavy-charged particles that originate from the sun. To put things in perspective, 1 year of Earth exposure to cosmic rays is equivalent with 1 day of space radiation exposure in deep space. The purpose of the MARE experiment is to learn more about the radiation exposure as well as the biological effects of different organs.
So basically, it's like we have 3 occupants inside Orion that are learning about the moon and learning about the environment for our astronauts before they go.
Going back to the moon with new exploration goals and new technologies will help us gain better understanding of the challenges we encounter with deep space exploration.
We will have to develop new technology and solutions to meet really difficult challenges. But that's what NASA does. That's what Artemis is all about.
And we have one more passenger to tell you about. It's everyone's favorite beagle that's had a special connection with NASA ever since Apollo.
Artemis is NASA's plan to go back to the moon, and Snoopy is to be the zero gravity indicator.
A zero-G or zero gravity indicator demonstrates the moment that the crew in the spacecraft reach weightlessness.
Snoopy is about to take his first trip around the moon.
The relationship with NASA and Snoopy goes back about 50 years since the Apollo days.
He was the face of the safety campaign.
The icon for NASA's culture of safety and mission success. So NASA and Peanuts have a Space Act agreement.
And we were excited when it was decided that Snoopy would be the zero gravity indicator on Artemis I. We wanted to go all out, so we created a custom Snoopy.
And the spacesuit is actually made out of material worn by the NASA astronauts.
Everything was done with extreme detail. They cut patterns for his suit, even how his collar worked and how the NASA Meatball logo looked.
We're very excited. I'm personally very excited.
I can't contain the excitement I am feeling about this day. Snoopy is going farther in space than he's ever been before.
This is a day that we've all been waiting for. It's fantastic.
And we snapped this picture of Snoopy and Orion. He's comfortable and ready for his journey to the moon. Lucky for us that Snoopy has this twin that's staying here on Earth. That way we can take a closer look at how cute he is. And this orange suit, I mean, it is amazing. It's actually the same material that would be worn by Artemis astronauts, right?
Yeah, you know, the suits we'll be wearing in Artemis ultimately are an update of the suits that the shuttle crews wore. They're this iconic orange color. And we've updated them, though, with new technologies and also new crew capabilities so that they can best protect the crew in our return to the moon. I actually got to work with that suit team before my assignment.
That's cool.
And so the suit's kind of near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, I think we have a picture of you wearing the suit as part of when you were helping to design it, right?
Yeah, so I was our representation from the crew office, from the astronaut office, to the engineering team that's working on putting this suit together. So I got the chance to wear it for some of the early testing, and it is an amazing suit, and it'll protect us while we're in the vehicle.
Cool. So what was your zero-G indicator?
Yeah, like the video mentioned, we always choose stuffed animals. So we actually had a turtle. We named her Pfau, which is German for peacock. And we chose that because Raj and I are from the turtle training class, so we thought it would be fun to have a sea turtle as our zero-G indicator, but we wanted to have a nod to Matthias, who is a German astronaut, so that's why we gave her a German name, and Tom, who's from the peacock class. So she's peacock colored, and it kind of worked for everybody.
I was about to ask, I was like, wait, why is it German for peacock, but it's a turtle?
Yeah, exactly.
Now I get it.
It was, you know, diplomacy, crew diplomacy
Now
move.
I get it. So we had turtle, we have Snoopy here. Why is it always toys?
I think the tradition goes back to crews taking stuffed animals from their children and sometimes flying the stuffed animals of their kids. That still happens to this day when a crew selects a zero-G indicator, but they're convenient because they're nice and soft. So if you're going to allow something to bounce around in the capsule, you want to make sure that it won't hurt the crew or any of the equipment.
And they're cute. I mean,
yeah.
come on.
Who doesn't want a mascot?
Makes you smile, yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, NASA's workforce has changed over the last 50 years. For Artemis I today, women make up 30% of the launch team. But when we first stepped on the moon with Apollo 11 in 1969, take a look at this picture here. You see this woman highlighted near the center there? That's going to be Joanne Morgan, and she was the only woman in the firing room. She now has a special message for the Artemis generation.
Hello, I'm Joanne Morgan, and I am so excited for Artemis I. This flight test will bring new knowledge to people on Earth, and I'm thrilled to see such a diverse team at the LCC making it happen. Firing Room 1 is a different site today than when I was on console for Apollo 11. I was totally focused on doing my job and never thought about being the only woman in the room. Today, women at NASA are center directors and launch and flight directors and have substantial roles in engineering, science, and technical areas. This is so important for a new generation, the Artemis generation, to see how individuals are leaders and contributors to the mission, and for youth across America and the planet to see this as well. After 50 years, it is gratifying to see this change, and I can't wait to see what you all accomplish together. New century, new generation, new mission to the moon and beyond. Godspeed, Artemis team and Artemis I.
I think it's so great that we know she's following along and interested in this mission too.
Yeah, it's so awesome to see the women who have come before us at NASA and paved the way for a much more diverse team to contribute to these amazing missions.
Yeah, and speaking of women breaking the mold, before serving as a NASA astronaut, I know you were a naval officer and a member of the first class of women commissioned to the submarine community. How amazing is that? I mean, what would you say as you look at these pictures? What would you say to women, young girls who might be thinking, hey, I might want to join a predominantly male field?
Yeah, you know, I was just really lucky to be in the right place at the right time. I was a senior at the Naval Academy when they announced that they were going to change the policy and allow us to serve aboard submarines. But even before that change happened, I knew that I was passionate about serving in that role and I was dreaming about it. So I think allowing yourself to really examine what your passions are and be brave enough to dream that you could actually do those things. I had awesome mentors who encouraged me along the way and told me never close a door on yourself. You know, you always want to put yourself in the roles you're most passionate about, especially if you're going to challenge yourself. Doing something you love that's hard is so much better than doing something that you're not as well suited to. So I was just lucky I had some awesome leaders in my life who encouraged me to be brave enough to dream so that when those opportunities presented themselves, I was ready to take them on.
Yeah, no, that's great. Having mentors is always so important because, yes, sometimes you don't know what path to take, especially if you're blazing your own. So it's always so nice to have somebody to talk through some of that.
Absolutely.
52 minutes until the opening of the 2-hour window for Artemis I today. Once it soars off the launch pad, our colleagues over in Houston will take over. Leah, how are things looking in mission control right now?
Hey Megan, I'm here now, and thanks for joining us again here in the White Flight Control Room here at NASA's Johnson Space Center. So you might be wondering why Johnson Space Center will control the flight of Orion after liftoff, even though it's launching at Kennedy Space Center, and that's all about how our flight control centers are designed. Launch control is at Kennedy, while mission control is in Houston, and we also have the SLS Engineering Support Center at NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center. Ever since the Gemini 4 mission in 1965, all flights have been commanded from Houston after launch, so we have the infrastructure and the experience here at Johnson Space Center to work through long-duration missions with, or in this case, without crew. Additionally, launches must be conducted over water rather than over populated areas, which makes Kennedy Space Center a prime location. Again, we're ready to jump into action once SLS takes flight, and this room will be staffed around the clock until Orion splashes down at the end of the mission. We're excited to continue that work today with Artemis I and throughout the Artemis program, but for now, we'll turn it back over to you, Megan and Kayla.
Now, the fully stacked SLS and Orion system was rolled from the vehicle assembly building to the launch pad about 2 weeks ago. We captured this video of the 4-mile, 9-hour journey. It took a special transporter and a special team of people to make it happen. Hear from them what it's like to shoulder the weight of this moment.
The crawler transporter is a machine that goes and picks up the mobile launcher, the SLS rocket with Orion. It's basically the cornerstone of the mobile launch concept. Without the crawler, you couldn't transport the mobile launcher and the vehicle from the VAB to the pad or the pad back to the VAB. And it was designed and built for the Apollo program to move Saturn V's to the launch pad. Since then, we've modified it and used it to move the entire shuttle program. And after the shuttle program, we did extensive modifications, and now it's to be used to move Artemis to the launch pad. The crawler is 136 feet long from end to end. It's 114 feet wide from the edge of the truck to the other edge of the truck. It weighs 6.6 million pounds. It has the power to do 2 miles an hour, but you never want to go that fast. Generally, we're around 0.83 for SLS. Artemis will be one of the heaviest loads we've ever carried and one of the tallest loads we've carried. I am exceptionally proud of our team. They're very talented, they're very committed, and they're just all around good team. I think any problem that crops up or anything that comes up, we'll fix it and we'll get moving again. And again, it starts right here with the crawler. So if we do our job and everybody else does theirs, man, we're going to have a successful launch. We're going back to the moon. This is going to be just fantastic.
Such an impressive team, and the crawler, Kayla. I mean, this is a certificate from the Guinness Book of World Records.
Yeah, it's pretty cool getting recognized for the heaviest self-powered vehicle in the world at 3,106 tons.
That's amazing.
It's amazing.
I know. We were just talking about how awesome the crawler is. I mean, it was retrofitted. It was created in the Apollo for the Apollo missions, and it was updated, modified for shuttle, and now it's been modified for Artemis. It's just really an amazing machine, and the people who keep it maintained and operate it. Like, I'm so glad that we could feature them today.
Absolutely.
All right, so we are 48 minutes and counting, again, from that opening of the 2-hour window we have today. Kayla, if you thought you were excited, you have got to check out this video here.
This is really cool. We got some children that are on a bus, and they're going to come here to the vehicle assembly building, and the administrator and I are going to jump on the bus and surprise them.
We're going to give them the opportunity to come in and go up the elevator with the rocket.
Wow! It's so cool! Look at that thing! Whoa, that's awesome!
Hey guys, would you like to see a moon rocket? Because it is the future of our country, indeed the future of the world. And we saw what our space program does for science and technology and engineering and mathematics. We saw that in the Apollo generation.
All right, guys, what do you think? What I hope to achieve today is inspiring a new generation. I mean, the more people that we can get to see up close and personal this rocket, it's awe-inspiring. And I cannot wait till the launch. When America sees our rocket actually launch on a test flight to the moon, you know, it's just going to spark a whole new push for what we are doing.
Best day of my whole life ever. It's going to be incredible. It was a dream come true.
This rocket is definitely going to the moon.
I think it's really amazing.
We have the Artemis generation. This is a new generation of us going back to the moon to learn and live, and then we're going to Mars.
I told you they were so excited. They're so cute. Their faces, it was amazing.
I think my face looked pretty similar the first time I walked into the VAB and looked up at that rocket. I mean, the building is huge, and standing at the base of the rocket just takes your breath away. The scale of it, you know, 322 feet, especially stacked on its end like that, is just amazing. So yeah. I almost relived my first time in the VAB through their eyes.
And it was really cool. There was this opportunity where they got to just ask any questions they wanted. I was there, so they were asking me questions. They were asking the administrator, Bob Cabana as well, and they just hands shot up. They just had questions, and then sometimes I didn't really know the answer, and they're like, well, it's this, and I was like, oh my god, they know so much and they're so interested in it. I mean, again, this is why we're doing this. This is part of the inspiring the next generation.
Absolutely. Whenever I get a chance to interact with kids kind of any age, all the way from elementary school up through college, the human spaceflight program, and Artemis in particular, I think really captures people's imagination and gets them interested in everything it takes to do something so daring and so complicated.
Yeah. And actually, before we move on, an interesting note about the opening music in that video. It's an original composition called The Artemis Generation, performed by the Cooper Middle School Band percussion section of McLean, Virginia. And to continue to inspire the Artemis generation, NASA invited students to take part in a national essay contest, challenging them to imagine what it'd be like to lead a week-long mission to the moon's South Pole. Here's the first winner now.
I gazed out of our moon pod window just before it was time to exit. My crew of 3 and I had been working for years to get here. Our crew consisted of a botanist, an engineer, a doctor, and me, an astrobiologist. We'd been picked because of how well we got along together, with our complementary STEM backgrounds and our naturally upbeat personalities. Houston, this is Artemis Crew 1, initiating airlock sequence, I said over my microphone. I looked at my crewmates, and as I stepped out of the pod, I felt so gratified, becoming the first woman on the moon. Our purpose was to set up a moon habitat containing the 4 things needed to keep a crew safe: oxygen and clean water, a waste disposal system, the veggie project for food, and a protective outside shell made of regolith and mycelium. We will build it over the next week, and it will be used by other astronauts for years to come. Embarking on this incredible adventure, I couldn't help but be grateful to be given this opportunity to lead the most remarkable crew and to know that I was a part of the Artemis generation.
So that was beautifully written by Taya Sauer of Laguna, California, and she was one of 3 essay winners. The 2 others were Austin Pritz of Walcott, Indiana, and Amanda Gutierrez of Lincoln, Nebraska. If you want to check out their essays, you can scan the QR code you see on the screen. The 3 of them beat out nearly 14,000 students who submitted essays, so you definitely want to check out the other 2, again, by scanning this QR code. So right now you're looking live at right outside of Kennedy Space Center's visitor complex. We have plenty of bleachers set out to accommodate, as you can see, a lot of guests that are hoping to see the launch today. So why don't we go in there and check back in with NASA's Leo Martin.
Hi, Megan. Yeah, this place is filling up. You can feel the excitement, people chattering, people sharing stories, people talking. And, you know, we just heard about those Artemis Moonpod essay winners who are part of the Artemis generation. Also joining me tonight from the Artemis generation, we have 2 students who were actually able to come down and visit at Kennedy Space Center to watch this launch live tonight. I'm joined here by Denham and Allison. How does it feel to be here tonight?
Really, when I first found out, I was really nervous. I didn't really know what to expect. Like, we really just looked at each other and we kind of screamed.
Yeah. Just out of excitement?
Yeah.
How did you feel?
Honestly, it was like amazing. It was surreal. Like that we have this opportunity out of so many people who applied for this. It was like outstanding.
And you guys actually got to take a tour of Kennedy Space Center a little bit earlier this week. What was something that you got to see that was just really outstanding?
I think it was the shuttle experience, like how it is when the rocket ship goes on up with people in it. It was honestly really fun doing it and learning like how they feel at the moment.
And Denham, what do you think it will be like to watch the world's most powerful rocket launch tonight from just across the river?
Well, really, I don't really know what to expect because I've never really done this before, but I feel like it would really be outstanding. I might shed a little tear, but I don't really know. Like, I'm really excited to be here, and it's amazing. Like,
it is amazing, and I don't think you're going to be the only one shedding tears tonight. Megan, we're super excited, eyes on Artemis, and we're ready to see the launch.
Thanks so much, guys. Now, Kayla, are you ready for more questions from social media? We're getting them in.
Always.
All right, let's take a look at the screen now. We have another celebrity question.
Hey, I'm Keke Palmer, and I play Izzy Hawthorne in Pixar's Lightyear, and I can't wait to see Artemis I launch today. How will going back to the moon pave the way to Mars?
Thank you, Keke.
Yeah, what an awesome question for tonight. I mean, the return to the moon is going to give us a chance to test all of the capabilities we need to operate on Mars. Mars is really far from home. It's going to take us 6 months just to get there, and that's with ideal planetary alignment and expected advances in propulsion technology. Then we'll spend about a year plus on the surface before it's 6 months home. And so the moon is a lot closer. We can get there in 3 days. The communications delay is a lot shorter, and so we can really test our operational concepts a lot closer to home. The moon's super far away. It's 250,000 miles, but that's way closer than Mars. So it's going to give us a chance to test all of our technologies so that we know what we need to develop in order to take that next step.
Yeah, we call it the next giant step for a reason. Mars is very, very far, like you said. All right, let's take another question from social media. Kayla, what inspired you to be an astronaut?
You know, my journey was a little bit different than some of my colleagues. I didn't grow up specifically dreaming of becoming an astronaut. I don't know what the barrier was there. I was aware of and inspired by the space program, but I never allowed myself to dream of becoming an astronaut until I had served on a submarine, actually. I think that operational experience that's so similar to what we do in the space program, if you think about it, we're sending humans to live, work, and do something of importance in a place where people aren't supposed to be, the depths of the ocean or the vacuum of space. And so I think those experiences gave me the confidence to even dream that I could become an astronaut, and then inspired me to apply in the first place.
And that doesn't deter you, again, like being in a place where, yeah, we're not supposed to be, a confined space at that.
Yeah, I think those parallels, I got a chance to meet an astronaut after serving on my submarine, Kay Heyer, who's also a Naval Academy graduate, class of 1981. And hearing about her experiences working on the space station really made me click. All of a sudden I said, the space station's a submarine in space.
Yes.
And it sounds silly, but I had never made that connection before. And once I did, I just couldn't stop dreaming about it.
Oh, that's so cool. I love that your story isn't, you know, the typical one, as you said. Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Is Snoopy ready and excited?
Of course. I think like any crew member, Snoopy's been training for this moment. He knows what to expect in a nominal and an off-nominal launch and all the actions expected of him. So like any good crew member, he's ready to go.
And he has his suit that's been tailored to him. It's especially made for him, the way that the astronaut suits are especially made for them. So yeah, I think he's ready.
Yeah, seeing the moon up close, he's ready to go.
So keep those questions coming. Use that hashtag Artemis and tweet or drop them in the comments wherever you're watching this broadcast. And don't forget those NASA Moon Snaps. Hashtag NASA Moon Snap for your moon-inspired content. Okay, we are now 37 minutes from the opening of our 2-hour launch window today. Let's check back in with Daryl with the launch team.
Yeah, we've had a couple of issues that the launch team has been working, and we have an update on both of those. First of all, is the leak, the liquid hydrogen leak in the replenish valve out at the mobile launcher. We understand from the launch team that that leak has not recurred. The work that happened out at the pad is that the red crew and the work that they did out there remedied the leak. That's good news. And now the liquid hydrogen tank on the core stage is back in replenish at this moment. And the upper stage of the rocket, liquid hydrogen side, is in fast fill. You can see from the graphic there that we are back up to 100% over on the liquid hydrogen side on the right hand of the screen. On the left hand of the screen, you can see we have been in stable replenish for liquid oxygen. Now, with regards to the range, they reported that they had an issue to the NASA test director with their radar sight. Later found out that that was actually a bad Ethernet switch that was cutting out and not providing them the data. The range reported that they will swap out that bad switch, and they're currently working on that. They advised at the time, about a half hour ago, that it would take them about 70 minutes, or about 25 minutes into that work. They did just recently update the NASA test director to say that it's going to take them a little bit longer because they're going to need to re-verify this Ethernet equipment once they have it installed. Again, that work is ongoing, but at the moment, if we were launching right now, the range is no-go as a result of that bad Ethernet switch. The Dolly-Loo file, which helps steer the Space Launch System through the upper atmosphere, has been uploaded to the rocket, and so we're good to go there in terms of other configurations that are ongoing. But we are continuing to monitor communications of the launch team about holding to the top of the window, currently slated for 1:04 a.m. Eastern Time. But we do have 2 hours, and we have yet to see whether or not the launch team is going to be able to make enough adjustments in order to hit the top of that window. No slip yet, but we're monitoring their work, and we'll give you an update when we have it. Back to you, Megan.
Thank you, Daryl. Really great news about that leak. Kayla and I actually said, wow, that's really great news. So we'll wait on your next update. Let's go back live now to Kennedy Space Center's visitor complex, where we have NASA's Dan Hewitt inside there with our new moon board. Dan, let's focus in on Orion now. It has 3 main elements, right?
That's right, Megan. And Orion is the spacecraft that's going to be carrying our Artemis astronauts off of planet Earth and then returning them home. As you said, 3 major components, so we'll jump in here at the top with the first one, the launch abort system. This is a critical safety feature on Orion, designed to pull the capsule away from the SLS stack in the event of an emergency on the pad or the way uphill. And it does that using 3 solid rocket motors. The first one, the abort motor, can fire within milliseconds of automatically detecting an issue, pulling the capsule away to a safe distance. After that, the attitude adjustment motor. This one will fire. We can cancel out any rates, put us into a nice stable glide before we get ready to fire the jettison motor. This is the one that will actually take the launch abort system off of Orion, allowing it to then deploy parachutes and parachute down to safety. I will note the jettison motor, the only one that fires no matter what on a normal mission. It's going to fire once we're high enough in the atmosphere. And for Artemis I, that is the only motor on this that is active. The attitude and abort motors are inert for Artemis I. And that's all focused on protecting this, the Orion crew module. This is where you have your astronauts physically inside. In the capsule, you have everything you need to keep a crew safe, happy, healthy, thriving in deep space. You have a pressurized environment, seats, crew displays, toilet, everything that you need. On the outside, couple of critical features. On the bottom, the heat shield. Remember, this is goal number 1 for this mission, is testing that heat shield. It's an ablative structure made to survive that fiery reentry at the end of a mission. Along the outside, you see these small gray circles. Those are reaction control system thrusters. Orion can use that at the very end to control the yaw, pitch, and roll as it's hurtling through the atmosphere. We have windows. You need windows to look outside. 2 on the front, 2 on the sides, 1 in the side hatch, 1 up top in the very top docking hatch. Those are different layers of glass and acrylics for pressure and thermal control. We have a docking system, an uprighting system, parachutes, all for the very end of the mission. Third and final piece, down here at the bottom, the European Service Module. This has all of the propulsion assets for after SLS has done its job. Starting on the bottom, the large orbital maneuvering system engine. This is the one that's providing the most thrust for all of those key maneuvers around the moon. 8 auxiliary thrusters also around the aft to the bottom part of the service module to provide some additional push as well. And then 24 of these smaller reaction control system thrusters. They can be used for attitude control, which way you're pointing, as well as small translational maneuvers moving side to side. We flip the vehicle up, we see 4 solar arrays, each one 24 feet in length, altogether generating 11 kilowatts of electrical power for Orion systems. Inside the service module, you have tanks for things like the thermal control system, potable water when we have a crew on board, and also pressurized oxygen and nitrogen for an atmosphere, which gets fed through this umbilical here to the crew module, along with electrical lines. That's also what's going to separate us at the very end of the mission. So that's Orion. It's going to be making its first flight around the moon on Artemis I. Can't wait to see it, taking those selfies around our lunar neighbor. Send it back over to you, Megan.
Thanks, Dan. That last component Dan talked about, the European Service Module provided by the European Space Agency. Let's go to Jasmine for that.
Thank you, Megan. We are back in Firing Room 2 with the Launch Control Center, and joining us now is Philippe Delou, ESA's Program Manager for the Orion European Service Module. You have quite the title there, a big title for a big job, I'm sure. We are very glad to have you here, and we understand that the European Service Module is powering Orion that's going to send humanity farther than ever before. Philippe, how is it getting us there?
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, everyone. So yes, the service module accommodates the propulsion system that contains among the tanks and the pressurization of the system the engine, all the engines, 33 engines in total, among which the main engine, which is going to perform the burns to put Orion into the moon orbit and then back on the trajectory to return to Earth. The other engines are used for attitude correction during, attitude control and trajectory correction during the travel to the moon. In addition to the propulsion system, the service module generates the power and distributes the electricity to the crew module and the service module equipment so that they can operate. And the third function is the thermal control of the system. The service module accommodates radiators to reject the heat that is produced by all the equipment and the crew that will eventually be in the Orion. Finally, not on Artemis I, but on future Artemis mission, it will have tanks to store the crew consumable, the water, the oxygen, and the nitrogen.
Right. So we understand, too, that you are monitoring launch here in Firing Room 2 with us. And you also have a team. We're going to bring up a picture of that team right now, or a live look inside ESA's control room in the Netherlands. So can you tell us, what is your team working on today?
Yes. Well, the ESA team is not only back in the Netherlands, it's one aspect, but we have also a significant team in the control room in Johnson, in the MER control room. And their role is to monitor the telemetry from the service module to make sure that all parameters are within their nominal behavior, that the operations are performed also nominally, and for sure identify if something goes wrong, if something goes not nominal. And if something non-nominal is identified, then they will have the role to support the NASA team to troubleshoot the anomaly and prepare the recommendation to be brought to the mission management team for a decision on how to operate the vehicle forward.
Great. We're really glad to hear that your teams are monitoring here, Johnson in the Netherlands as well. And this has been a huge collaboration. There were 10 countries that contributed to the European service module. Can you tell me about that teamwork?
Indeed, it was a real teamwork of about 60 companies across 10 European countries. Well, together with the prime contractor, we have selected the finest companies available in Europe to build a state-of-the-art equipment which is needed to go back to the moon with humans.
Right, we're going back to the moon and farther even beyond. Thank you so much, Philippe. I really appreciate you being here tonight.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Of course, of course. Megan, back to you.
Now it's time to check back in with Mission Control in Houston. Leah, how are things over there?
Things are good over here at Johnson Space Center, which is just one part of an agency-wide effort with many NASA programs doing their part to make future missions a reality. When the first woman and first person of color travel to the moon, they'll be wearing a state-of-the-art launch and entry spacesuit called the Orion Crew Survival System. When they set foot on the moon, they'll be in another all-new next-gen suit, both being developed at the Johnson Space Center and through partnerships with commercial providers. During those spacewalks, astronauts will collect samples for further study of the moon. The Astromaterials Research and Exploration Science Division at JSC is preparing to receive rocks, soil, and ice collected from the moon's south pole, which has a unique crater impact history and ice deposits that have never been sampled. And leading the effort to advance capabilities for science, exploration, and commercial development of the moon is the Commercial Lunar Payload Services Initiative, or CLPS. More than a dozen American companies are developing science investigations and tech demos. Additionally, we need a sustainable presence, a specific station in orbit to facilitate continuous lunar access and serve as a home base or a jumping off point for new deep space exploration missions. This is where Gateway comes in. It's a multi-purpose lunar space station being developed by a worldwide effort led out of JSC. NASA is again teaming up with international and commercial partners to create this essential component. Artemis and Gateway will enable NASA's Human Research Program to better understand how the human body adapts beyond low Earth orbit, ensuring future astronauts traveling to the moon and Mars have the tools to keep healthy and thrive in new environments. And with that, we're going to turn it back over to Megan and Kayla at Kennedy.
Thank you so much. So Artemis will also facilitate new discoveries about the moon. So to tell us what we're hoping to learn, we have Sarah Noble here. She's the Artemis Lunar Science Lead. Great to have you here.
Thanks.
So tell us about what we know about the moon.
Yeah, so we learned a ton about the moon during Apollo, right, from the samples and the data that we collected. In fact, we're still learning from those samples and data even today, 50 years later. But then since Apollo, you know, we've actually been studying the moon mostly from above, learning about getting more of a global perspective on the moon that we really didn't have during Apollo. And so that's allowed us to ask a lot better questions and to understand where to go to find the answers to them.
Now that we're headed back to the moon, sending human beings as part of the Artemis program, what are we hoping to learn that's new?
Yeah, so we're going to an entirely different part of the moon for Artemis, right? During Apollo, we kind of landed almost in the same place, like 6 times, right? In the sort of central near side of the moon. But for Artemis, we're going to go explore a new part of the moon. We're going to go to the South Pole, which is some of the oldest rocks on the moon. It's the part of the original crust of the moon. And there's places there that are permanently shadowed, where we think that water and other molecules sort of get trapped, and we really want to understand what those are, and so that we can use them for both science and for as a resource.
Sarah, we're also planning to land a rover at the south pole of the moon in late 2024. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. The Viper rover, the Volatiles Investigating Polar Exploration Rover, is going to go land near the South Pole, and it's actually going to explore some of these permanently shadowed areas. It's going to dip into them, drill down, try to find out what that water is, what else is there, what form that water is, how much is there, so that we can really understand it both from a science perspective, and if we want to use it as a resource, we will understand how to extract it.
So some people might say, you know, we have all these rovers, we have access to machines that can do a lot of the work on the surface of the moon for us, so why is it important to return humans to the moon?
Yeah, it's not an either-or proposition, right? There are some things that robots are better at and some things that humans are better at. And it turns out that humans are much better field geologists. We're really much more efficient and better at that. Plus, we can do better. We can deploy more complicated instruments, and we can use tools in ways that it's very difficult for robots to do, so we can collect better samples. And one of the great things is that we can bring back a lot of samples, right? When we do robotic sample return, it's usually a very small amount. But if you look at what we brought back from Apollo, it's a large amount of samples that literally hundreds, probably maybe thousands of scientists have been able to study over the years and over generations. And that's a lot of brain power to put behind those samples.
So again, that's how Artemis and Apollo are different. Now we're utilizing machines and people.
That's right.
To hopefully advance. Yeah.
That's right.
Perfect. Sarah, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
So in honor of our destination, the moon, we asked you all to create moon-inspired content and share them with us using the hashtag NASA MoonSnap. We got so many wonderful submissions, so why don't we check them out now? That was a really cool look at all the different kinds of creations, recipes, and also art, and it was great to see what people submitted.
Yeah, it's awesome to see the creativity out there and how people are engaging with this mission in so many different ways.
Yeah. So I know that you didn't submit it yet, but you did create a moon snap, so to say. So why don't we take a look at that picture?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite pictures of the moon that I was able to take from orbit. I think for me, it kind of reminds me of that iconic picture of moonrise or Earthrise from the moon from Apollo. And it's kind of that in reverse. I think there's something about seeing the moon from orbit around the Earth that makes it seem a little bit easier to imagine what it'd be like to have that view from the moon looking back at our home planet.
Yeah, you should definitely submit that because that's an amazing photo. Did you take that yourself?
Yeah, out of the cupola window aboard the space station.
Wow, the resolution's great.
The cameras we have up there are incredible.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
So I haven't taken a moon snap, so I had nothing to submit. So how do you feel about creating a moon snap with me?
Let's do it.
All right, well, take that, if you don't mind lifting it up, and we're just gonna snap a photo here. Oh, lighting. Perfect. So I just created a moon snap. I love it. I'm going to share it. And again, this is just to encourage people to really get involved in this mission. So we will continue to collect and share those photos. So again, if you have a NASA moon snap, just use that hashtag. Okay, Artemis I comes amid a very busy year and exciting year at NASA. Some of the highlights include 2 more commercial crew launches with SpaceX, Crew 4 in April, and then Crew 5 last month. In May, NASA and Boeing flew OFT-2, the second uncrewed flight test of the Starliner capsule. The goal is to certify the capsule for regular flights to the International Space Station after a crewed flight test next year. In July, we released the first images captured by our James Webb Telescope, and oh my, those are really beautiful, fascinating photos, and they're going to really help us answer some of astronomy's biggest questions about how our universe began. And then in September, we intentionally slammed the DART spacecraft into asteroid Dimorphos. Boom, look at that. And we successfully changed its course. The asteroid wasn't headed for Earth, but the test was to show we could defend our planet if needed. And recently, 2 other missions that benefit the Artemis program. Last week, we tested a new inflatable heat shield that could help us eventually land humans on Mars. And just 2 days ago, Capstone arrived at its intended orbit around the moon. The small satellite launched from New Zealand in June and will now test a unique lunar orbit for a future space station there.
Artemis I heralds a new era in the history of human spaceflight. It marks a pivotal next step in humanity's return to the moon, ushering in a new generation of astronauts, technology, and research. This critical flight test sets the course for a bright future at the moon. It represents our ability to safely send Artemis astronauts and critical hardware to lunar orbit. Humanity will experience Artemis in different ways than we did Apollo. We will explore new areas of the moon with 21st century materials, technologies, systems, and operations. Gateway will be humanity's first space station to orbit the moon, built with next-generation technology. Gateway will not only provide a deep space outpost for future lunar expeditions, it will also serve as a station for landers, experiments, and supplies. Starting with the core power and habitation elements, Gateway will grow with increasing capability as international partners contribute new habitat and refueling modules, observation windows, external robotics, and more. Gateway will enable longer stays and more science to be conducted on and around the moon than ever before. And one day, it will help set the stage for missions to Mars. A highly skilled, diverse core of astronauts will be selected for Artemis missions, including the first woman and first person of color to step foot on the moon. Aboard Gateway, the crew will conduct exciting research from their unique deep space vantage point. Gateway will also be a transfer station for astronauts to board innovative human landing systems that will ferry them to and from the lunar surface for exciting scientific expeditions near the South Pole. Once on the moon, Artemis astronauts will use expertise in fields like biology and geology to conduct groundbreaking research in modern spacesuits using advanced tools. They will drive new rovers to investigate the lunar terrain and unlock some of the greatest mysteries of our solar system. Artemis I cements our capability to send astronauts and cargo to the moon for years to come. We're going back to the moon. We are Artemis.
As we approach the opening of our 2-hour launch window, we have a special musical performance for you. America the Beautiful, played in honor of the flight test by the Philadelphia Orchestra and Yo-Yo Ma. truly beautiful performance. It really has me feeling quite emotional right now.
Yeah, perfect tribute for tonight's launch.
You know, it's just, it gives me a sense of pride, really, to just remember that our country continues to lead our nation in space exploration. So, and as such, the White House is closely watching this historic launch. Earlier this year, Vice President Kamala Harris came down to Kennedy Space Center and met with NASA leadership as well as astronauts. She also toured our facilities where teams are working on hardware for future Artemis missions. Before leaving, she signed a piece of the Orion spacecraft that will fly on Artemis III. She's doing it right there, which will return astronauts to the lunar surface. Okay, Kayla, time for more social questions. So let's take the first one. You know now the drill. It's going to be a celebrity question, so let's take that.
Hey guys, I'm Jack Black, and I'm super excited for the Artemis I launch today. I was part of a little movie called Apollo 10½, A Space-Age Childhood, and I have a few burning queries. Question the first. How is Artemis different than Apollo?
Artemis is different than Apollo because we're returning to the moon, but this time we're going to stay. So rather than a short visit where we can do some amazing science, but it was pretty limited by these short visits, kind of a small area of the moon, we're going to the South Pole and we're going to learn how to live there long term. So we're going to be building habitats, we're going to have rovers, we're going to have all of this infrastructure on the moon supporting scientific discovery, but also that next big step to Mars.
I love seeing celebrities also take part and ask questions because it really shows that this is something that's captivating a lot of people. So that was really fun to see Jack Black. Also, query the first. That was funny. All right, let's go to the second question. How does it feel in space?
Being in space is amazing. I mean, for us launching to orbit around the Earth and then go to the space station where I just was for 6 months, we're in an apparent microgravity environment. So for us, it feels like we're weightless, like we're floating. So you have to relearn how to live and work in that space. But once you get used to it, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, we were just talking, Jessica Watkins, another NASA astronaut, was just here. And she was saying that actually when you came back on Earth, that was an adjustment as well because you got so used to living on the space station.
Yeah, the transition home was actually a lot harder for me than the transition up there because our vestibular systems kind of remap. We start ignoring all the sensors in our inner ear that tell us how our bodies are moving because the space environment is so strange, but we really need that on Earth to balance and control our bodies.
Sure.
So when we get back, it takes a couple of days before we feel comfortable again.
Really interesting. Thanks so much for those. Okay, so we are 10 minutes until the opening of our 2-hour launch window today. So why don't we head back over to Daryl. Daryl, tell us what's happening now.
Yeah, Megan, we actually have about 10 minutes before we go into a half-hour hold. That half-hour hold is part of the L clock, and what you see on your monitor right now, I believe, is the T clock. So in about 10 minutes, we'll hold for a half hour, and currently the launch team is trying to evaluate how much of a delay may result from some issues that we've been facing over the past hour. Just to recap those, we had a leak in a replenish valve on the mobile launcher that feeds into the liquid hydrogen core stage tank. That's been resolved. The leak has been fixed, and we're moving forward. Currently, the upper stage of the rocket for liquid hydrogen is roughly 78% at the moment. So that is tracking. Progress continues there. The core stage has been topped off, and now both liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen are 100%, along with the upper stage of the liquid hydrogen side of the equation. So we're just waiting on the complete tanking of the upper stage liquid hydrogen. Now, with regards to the range issue that we had, we just got an update from the range, the 45th Space Wing officer reporting in to the NASA test director that the Ethernet switch has been replaced. This problematic switch took down their ability to see radar from one of their assets, which is key in getting acquisition and signal for the flight termination system if it were to be needed. Of course, this is a critical system that has to be tested before we can launch. So at the moment, we're looking still at a 1:04 a.m. Eastern Time launch. But it is pretty clear from the work that is ahead that it looks like we're going to slip into that window. How much exactly, we don't have an accurate calculation from the launch team as of right now. But of course, we're anticipating that. So for the moment, you see on your clock now, we are in the T-minus 10-minute hold. We just entered that. And now roughly we're looking at 28 minutes to resume terminal count. The launch team will assess what work needs to be done, how that syncs up with the range getting back online with their equipment, and then we should have a new T0 for you soon. That's the latest from Firing Room 1 here at the Kennedy Space Center. Megan, back to you.
So things are obviously still very dynamic. We're going to come back to Daryl as much as possible. Now, to understand where we are going, we have to know where we have been. To do that, we spoke to some of the special few who walked on the moon and those who sent them.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills.
It's been 50 years since we've been to the moon, and we've got a great program called Artemis. We're going back. The Apollo program was a test for the American people that you can do what you set out to do. All it took was turning to it and making it happen.
We are go for a mission to the moon at this time.
Engines on, 5, 4, 3, 2, all engines running. Launch commit, liftoff. We have liftoff, 49 minutes past the hour.
I think the characteristic that I remember most of at Saturn V was the noise. The noise was enormous and it was almost impossible to communicate.
We're go, train tide, we're go.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
The landing to me was a great celebration. The nation was almost euphoric.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
There are so many things that we can eventually learn about our universe and the spacecraft that we use exploring.
We are a nation of explorers. During Apollo, we were on national TV literally every day because we were doing something visible that Americans could see and they could feel and say, look what we are doing. And I believe Artemis is going to come up and say, look what we are capable of and what we are doing now.
Artemis will stand on the shoulders of Apollo. They're going to have the eyes of the world on them when they start down this trail.
The science of a spaceflight is one that will continue to inspire. Going to the moon generates technology, more communications, more computer technology, more sophistication in manufacturing that help us in everyday life.
We have a generation that is ready, a generation with that technology, a generation with the education. Artemis represents the future in space. It is our next big step, and it is time to take it.
If you're just joining us, welcome to NASA's Kennedy Space Center, where we are showing you a live look of another visitor center. This is the U.S. Space and Rocket Center. Wow, take a look at all of those people who are there hoping to watch the launch today. You know, this is the visitor center for the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama. That center played a crucial role in contributing to the Artemis program, so I'm not surprised that there are a bunch of people there watching. All right, so now we're going to go back to Leah Martin over at Banana Creek. Again, that's right outside of our visitor center, and she's with some other folks who came out to watch today's launch.
Yeah, you know, Megan, we talked about this being America's rocket, right? Every state in the United States has contributed to this rocket, so it should be no surprise that we have people from all over the country joining us here tonight. I'm actually joined by some friends of ours who are joining us from Georgia and Utah. What does it mean to be here tonight to see tonight's launch?
I think it's amazing. I know that tons of people from all over the United States have helped build the rockets and are here tonight, so it's awesome to know that we all have a little bit of personal ties to the rocket.
And go ahead.
No, I'm just excited to be here because I've been a fan of space travel and going to the moon and back, and I'm glad to see it's happening again later in life.
And you were actually telling me a little bit earlier that you grew up in the Apollo era in those years following those first launches, and now here, how does it feel to be watching the sister program launch and seeing at the beginning?
Look at the goosebumps. That tells it all right here. I'm totally thrilled to be here.
Now, and you were actually telling me that you have a personal connection to this rocket as well. You know some people who have worked on it. What do you think it feels like being here? How does it feel for you to see something that's the culmination of so many years of hard work?
Yeah, I think it's crazy when you think about how long it takes to build it and stuff. Like, I wasn't even born last time people tried to get to the moon. So it's awesome. I think it's so exciting, and I cannot wait.
And we have a ton of people who are working tonight still on call, and so we just wanted to tell them words of encouragement. What more do you have to say?
Oh, I hope it goes tonight.
Megan, back to you.
Go Artemis.
Woo! Go Artemis. Yes, I love that. And again, I just love these drone shots that we're showing of all the people who are here ready, hoping, anticipating launch today. So now let's head back over to Dan. So Dan is in the Apollo Saturn V Center, which is right next to this crowd that you're seeing here. He's inside there, and he's going to tell us more about SLS using an interactive state-of-the-art tool we're calling the Moon Board.
That's right, Megan, and everybody, welcome back to the moon board. So just to recap, SLS out on the pad, on the mobile launcher. Daryl's been walking you through all of the tanking, all of the preparation. We had that hydrogen leak that was in the base of the mobile service structure here. That's been remedied. We haven't had any issue with those tail umbilicals that we were tracking so closely back in August and September. So everything looking really good with SLS. Just to recap, most powerful rocket we have ever built. It's propelled by 2 solid rocket boosters and 4 engines on this core stage. Now these solid rocket boosters are going to be firing for the first roughly 2 minutes of the flight, a little more than 2 minutes. And we call them solids because of the type of propellant in there. If you forgot it already, it's aluminum.
Gracias por acompañarnos
Nada,
hoy.
nada. Es un placer.
Y bueno, entonces, ¿cómo se siente estar aquí otra vez en el Centro Espacial Kennedy?
Me siento muy bien, es un momento histórico, me parece, y me parece que el cohete se va a salir sin problemas.
Pues eso esperamos. Y bueno, te tengo que hacer la pregunta, ¿dónde aprendiste a hablar español tan bien?
Yo aprendí en la universidad un poco tarde, como a los 20 años de edad, pero mi primer trabajo como ingeniero fue en Madrid, en España, y me ha gustado mucho la ciudad, el país, y el idioma.
Muy bueno. Entonces, tú has estado ya 2 veces en la estación espacial.
Sí.
¿Nos puedes decir o nos puedes contar cómo los astronautas que aprenden allá que pueden ayudar para las misiones para ir a la Luna y más allá?
Pero hay muchas actividades de investigación científica en la estación espacial que nos van a ayudar. Estudian los seres humanos
T-minus 10
en
minutes
el, en
and
el medio
holding.
del
Got an
espacio.
update from the range to the
Y
NASA test
ahora el
director that
presente es
their
la
work
estación espacial,
on
pero
the
el
bag
futuro
Ethernet switch
va a
is
estar
complete.
estos vuelos
They are ready for open loop
más y más lejos,
tests.
hasta la Luna y
This
hasta
tests the range
Marte.
ability
Muy
to send a
bueno.
destruct
Y
signal to the
entonces,
rocket.
bueno,
In the
cuando
case it
tú
were to
estuviste
go
en la estación,
off
¿había
course.
algún experimento específico que tú estabas trabajando haciendo que pensabas que, hey, esto sería muy bueno cuando estuvieras en la Luna?
Claro, había uno en que pilotábamos como un rover fue en la Tierra, pero el escenario fue como los astronautas pueden controlar estos rovers en la Luna o en Marte, y eso los vamos a utilizar de verdad en las misiones futuras en la Luna.
Súper. Y bueno, ya hablando otra vez de Artemis, ¿qué es lo que más te emociona de estas misiones de Artemis?
Creo que lo que más me emociona como individual es que yo nunca vi a seres humanos en la Luna, en la superficie de la Luna, porque estoy demasiado joven. Para, para mí, para mi generación, va a estar la primera vez que vemos a los seres humanos en la superficie de la Luna, y por eso es muy especial para nosotros.
Sí, igualmente para mí también. Yo también estoy demasiado joven. Bueno, entonces, ¿a ti te gustaría ser uno de los astronautas que pisan la Luna, que estás en la Luna?
Claro que sí, claro que sí. A mí y a todos mis colegas en la Agencia Espacial Europea, a todos mis colegas de la NASA, claro que ahora tenemos la oportunidad quizás de volar a la Luna algún día. Fue mis sueños como cuando era pequeño, cuando era niño, y de tener la oportunidad algún día de hacerlo de verdad es muy especial.
Sí, bueno, pues ojalá ya
Ojalá,
pronto.
claro.
Entonces, ¿por qué es tan importante para el mundo ver y prestar atención a esta primera misión?